Hello, I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. Welcome to Gospel Minded, where we spend a few minutes each week talking about psychology, our emotions, our behavioral health, and we reflect on how these important topics are related to our spiritual life. Now, just like always, this isn't intended to be a substitute for going to church or counseling, therapy, spiritual direction, if you are engaged in any of those sort of practices. But at the same time, like we've seen week after week, our psychology, things of the mind, so often go hand in hand with our spiritual life. And that's certainly the case again this week, as we will see. So, you're probably noticing I'm in a different environment. It's Memorial Day weekend, so I'm traveling with my family again. I hope that you are having a happy and safe Memorial Day weekend as well. In addition to being the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, today also happens to be Trinity Sunday, which, what a profound solemnity and celebration that it is, that we had this opportunity to reflect upon the Trinitarian nature of our God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. What a profound mystery, and what a challenge it is to try and unpack that reality of one God with three distinct persons. So much time and effort and energy has been put into trying to unravel this mystery of the Trinity. And I'm not going to unpack it any further, especially when we have writings from Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. I'm also not trying to do these videos as a service to theology, but more as a service to psychology, the field that I have taken as a discipline. So that all this to say, how do we tie in our psychology and themes of behavioral health to the Trinity? It was a little bit of a head scratcher for me when I looked at the gospel for this week, because it alludes to that Trinitarian mystery, one God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So now this video is not scripted, they never are, but I will admit that I had to spend a little extra time trying to figure out a way to speak about things of behavioral health or the science of psychology as it relates to the Trinity for this Trinitarian Sunday. And it wasn't easy, might get a little bit theoretical and abstract, but if you bear with me, I'm going to give it a shot because I think I can tie it all together towards the end. All right, so here we go. Feedback loops. I've been thinking about feedback loops this week. What is a feedback loop? In psychology, we refer to feedback loops as this way of receiving input and stimulus from our environment around us. And with these feedback loops, we then take this stimuli in and interpret it, and it helps guide our decisions, our choices, our actions going forward. So think about this. We are very adept at humans for learning and for taking in cues from the world all around us and adjusting our behaviors accordingly, be it the environment that we're in, the literal space that we occupy. If something is unpleasurable or we dislike it, we make an attempt to adjust it, to change it, or to get away from it. We do this with other people. If somebody gives me an affirming look or affirmation or praise, or if they give condescension or a glare, we take all that stimuli in and we make choices or adjust our behaviors based on that kind of feedback that we're getting from the environment around us. So these feedback loops, super important, and they help us function optimally as human beings. Now, this idea of a feedback loop is also applied not just to individuals, but can be implied and interpreted in the context of bigger systems, say like a family. So I don't work with a lot of families myself as a therapist, but I am familiar with the idea of family systems theory, which relies heavily on this idea of feedback loops. So maybe you can see where I'm going with this. I'm starting to talk about the family, this idea of a unit, not entirely unlike the Trinity. one unit, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, three distinct members making the one God. So it is with a family as well. One family, but it's comprised of different individuals. And so for family systems theory, one of the key points is that the whole is more important than the sum of the individual parts. And so we have in a conventional family, father and mother and children, and the relationship between the father and mother is very important, and the relationship between the father and the children, or father and the oldest child, or father and the youngest child, is important, and the relationship between the mother and the youngest child, and the relationship between the children. I mean, all of that is relevant and important in family systems theory and to be addressed for sure. And yet, none of those individual pieces outweighs the greater whole, which is the family system in and of itself. So the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, a very important piece when we talk about family systems theory. Another piece of that theory is that the family unit seeks homeostasis. And what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is this state of balance or a state of equilibrium whereby the members of the family system can exist peacefully together in a state of harmony. Doesn't that sound nice? The whole family existing comfortably and contently together, all under one roof. Now that sounds great in theory, in family systems theory. Does it always look that way? Not always, and that's what we try to address in family therapy, and family systems theorists will use this idea of the feedback loop in the context of working with the family. So just like for me as an individual, this feedback loop or this theory of the feedback loop is very relevant. I'm constantly taking in the stimuli from the world around me, interpreting, making judgments. So it is with the family system or the family unit. We have these feedback loops whereby the family unit as a whole reacts to dynamics of the interpersonal relationships. So in family systems theory, there are two kinds of feedback loops. There are the positive feedback loops and the negative feedback loops. Now, when we talk about the positive feedback loops, what we'll tend to notice when we see these positive feedback loops is that it promotes an environment where there can be adaptability and change. And that is distinct from the negative feedback loops, which promote an environment of stability or predictability. So there are some ways that we can think about this with the world around us. Here in the southern part of the United States, it's getting real hot this time of year. And people start adjusting their thermostats. So think about your thermostat at home. When the house gets a certain temperature, it cues the AC to kick in, and it keeps the house at a constant temperature, keeping everybody comfortable. And when the house gets cooled, it will turn the AC off until the house gets uncomfortable again, cueing the AC to kick back on. That's a negative feedback loop. Or that kind of represents the idea of this negative feedback loop where there's a predictable temperature and a stability in temperature throughout the course of the season in the house. Negative feedback loop. That's distinct then from a positive feedback loop whereby there's going to be a change. So when we move closer to the fall and the weather starts to change outside in the southern part of the United States, my family is going to go to that thermostat and think, you know what, now that it's getting cooler at night, we don't need the AC to be on at 72 or 73 degrees anymore. We can probably change the AC to be 75, 76. So that would be a positive feedback loop. We're ushering in that environment where there can be change, and we are okay with change. So how does this look in family systems? it can be different. Some families are more open and receptive to that change. Some families are more resistant and less open to that change. But just know that this idea of taking in the cues from the other individuals around us, from the world around us, and what we do with that, if we want to use that to make predictability and stability, we're going to be seeing that negative feedback loop. Whereas if we're open to these changes, if we're willing to make adjustments, then that's what's going to reflect a positive feedback loop. And in a family, and for you as an individual, and me as well, both of them are okay at certain times. There are definitely times in the life of a family or as in the life of an individual where you want to have predictability and stability. But there are also times where it's important to facilitate change, where we'll have to make adapting moves to function our best and flourish. And so it's, again, very abstract, perhaps a little bit of a stretch when we're talking about Trinity Sunday. But at the same time, I think this idea of the family unit trying to reflect the love of the Trinity is what's most relevant here. And I think for family systems theorists, it's trying to, like I mentioned, help families get to this level of homeostasis, this contentness, this peace, this equilibrium. Now, if the Holy Trinity doesn't already possess that state of contentness, of peace, of equilibrium, then there's no hope for any of us. And so on this Trinity Sunday, I hope that you'll reflect on these ideas proposed by family systems theory. My hope for you and for my family as well is that we can, by paying attention to these cues in our environment around us, move towards that state of blessed contentedness and peace, and therefore reflect that love that we observe in the life of the Holy Trinity. So I hope this has been useful for you. I hope that you didn't find it was too much of a stretch, and I hope that you thought that it was some good stuff. I certainly enjoyed reading about it and learning more. Until next time, I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer here at Gospel Minded. Take care.